All right, guys, today we're going to get into creating a kind of a conceptual portrait using Photoshop. And I have some practice images we can work with, and you can also work with some of your own images as well. So, a conceptual portrait or artwork in any way is going to be something where it takes a little bit of time to kind of figure out. It's not going to be immediately the meaning of it is not going to be immediately like right there in your face. So sometimes you have to kind of decipher the images and the things that are in those images and how they relate to each other, to kind of understand the concept behind it all. And so the images that I have are going to be kind of random, um, but they're going to be, um, you know, something that we can work with. These are the ones that I'm just going to kind of play around with and show some Photoshop techniques as well to help you along with your own um, conceptual portrait. So if you'd like to use these, that's great. Otherwise, you can use some of your own images that you might have saved in your computer, or in a flash drive somewhere. So let's go ahead and get started. When you open up Photoshop, you're going to be greeted with something like this. And what we want to do is create a new file. And I click new up here, and this pops up. And we can just customize ours. It's fine. I'm going to kind of need like kind of a plan for mine. And I want it to be kind of wide. So I want it to be like 20 inches, let's say by like 8 inches. So it's going to be kind of a horizontal, almost panoramic type of a image. Now, if I do this, and I leave it as pixels, it's going to be super tiny. So what you want to make sure of is that you change this to inches, and notice that there's a big difference. So make sure that this is inches, and then change your size right there. Resolution is 300, and that's because of that's like the best quality you can have for printing. Everything else here can remain the same. It says color mode, but I'm going to make it, it says grayscale on mine. I'm going to make mine RGB color. And white, all of this is fine. I'm going to go to create here. So I have a really long canvas now to work with. I have this grid that shows up. I don't need this grid, so I'm going to get rid of that. And what I want to do is start to bring in my first image. And so there's a couple ways you can go about doing this. Let me make sure that this is all set up kind of how you want it to be. Now, if you should mess something up in your workspace in Photoshop, you can go over here to this little window and this little drop down, and it says we're in Essentials. And if something should happen, let's say your toolbar gets moved around or this gets moved around, things start getting kind of wonky, then you can always go over here and go to Reset Essentials, and it'll kind of snap everything back into place. So it'll kind of like save you there. This did not snap into place, but if you want to customize how you snap things, if you grab the little window, or toolbar, or whatever it might be, and drag it, you'll see these blue lines show up, and you can drag and drop them just like that. So that's kind of an easy way to get things back to normal. So I want to open an image that I have saved here and open it onto this canvas. So I'm going to go to File, and I'm going to go to Place, Embedded, and I'm going to locate the files that I have here. So mine, I'm going to start with the background image like this. I'm going to go to Place, and it's going to drop it in here just like that. That's fine. Now notice it doesn't fit my canvas. There's a couple things I can do here. I'm going to say, okay, I'm happy with what it did, but I'm really not. I can stretch this out to make it fit, but notice when I do that, I kind of lose some parts. So I can shift it up to kind of make it fit how I want. And so some parts of it are going to be cropped off, which is fine. Notice that when I did that, it brought it in as another layer, which is good too. So those layers, this is what Photoshop is all about, working with layers in here. Now, when I have this move tool selected, that allows me to move this around. I want to make sure that I have the right layer selected when I do that. So I can still shift it around and move it. And I see these little this box around it, and that's because I have this up here selected, show transform controls, and that allows you to see exactly how you can resize things, rotate them if you want to as well. So typical editing tools. And then whenever you do something like that, you have to tell Photoshop, yes, you're happy with it, and hit this little check mark. All right, so this is a good start. I've got a good background. I've got it kind of reformatted to this kind of panoramic canvas. I'm going to bring something else in because this isn't enough. So I'm going to go File, and I've got some other images chosen already. I've got this one that I like. Did this one on actually a school trip that I took some students to New York, and I'm zooming in by pressing Control plus. Control minus will zoom out. You also have a magnifying tool over here, or a zoom tool that allows you to do the same thing. So I'm going to prop this guy up right here in the side, and I'm going to say OK. But it looks kind of blocky, kind of chunky right there, so I don't really like that. I wish it were blended in a little bit better. So what I can do is, with this layer selected, this new layer that I have, it says Fulton Broadway, that's the name of the picture. I have this little option right here. This is a fun little tool to play with. This is your blending options, your blending modes. And so when I click on this and I choose these different modes, you can see how it kind of helps blend these images together, which is pretty cool. So you can find an option that you like, something that kind of stands out. I like it because it kind of takes the best parts of both images. Like it takes this and it takes that, and there's some parts that are still kind of blocky looking. It doesn't quite blend enough for me. So I'm going to look for some options that will look, kind of the style that I'm going for. So this is kind of cool. This is where you can kind of get abstract with it. You can have fun with different things, kind of highlight things that are most important to you, maybe hide things that are less important. So kind of play around with this and see what options you like there. And I think I'll go with something like I don't know, I kind of like the color burn. It looks kind of cool. And let's say it's too chunky, like it's too black, too much empty space down here. So I can always go back to this layer and say, hey, I want to drop this down. And that's kind of cool because then it changed the whole effect of how this looks too. So there's still some things that are blocked off here, kind of this hard line, but I can kind of work some other images in here to fix that up a little bit. So I'm going to do that by bringing in another image. I'm going to start with this one. We'll go back to File, Place Embedded, and I have this image right here. And so this is good, but what I want to do is really just select her. I just want the main subject selected here. So I can do that by a few tools down. You have some options here for selection tools. Object selection is one that kind of works out pretty well. And this is way easier than what it used to be. And so I can see what it's going to select. It selects almost exactly what I want it to. It selects around her, around the swing, goes up the swing a little bit, but it doesn't go up part of the other. So if I say, yes, I like that, I'm going to click on that. And then I'm going to go, and you see, once I click on it, it creates these lines, these dotted lines, look like ants marching around her. I'm going to refine this a bit, and I'm going to use my quick selection tool. So if I click and hold on this, go to that tool, I'm going to resize this. You can resize it either up here in this drop down, or the brackets next to the P on your keyboard will resize it, make it smaller or larger. And so I'm going to click up these links and kind of make sure that those are all selected. Go around, kind of make sure that most of what I want is selected accurately. Make sure everything looks good. Sometimes sorry about that. Sometimes it doesn't get it all, so I'm going to make sure I've got everything here selected the way I really want it to be selected. So once that's done, what I can do is I can right click on this. There's some things that are selected too much. So if it selects too much, you can press Alt on your keyboard as you click, and notice that there's a little negative sign there. It means you're taking away now. So once that's done, I'll right click on her, and I'm going to layer via copy. And so I can see over here, there's a copy of just her without the background. So I can actually turn this off and see what that looks like. And I like the way that looks. I'm going to resize this, make it a little bit larger. And like I said, I don't like this kind of hard line right here. So I'm going to kind of hide some of that. Doesn't really work great for the composition. So I'm going to kind of cover part of her over that, or cover part of that city street scene. And so now I've got some things here to work with. Now with this layer selected, I can do a few different things here. I can do some different filters. I can do some image adjustments as well. So if I go to adjustments over here on my panels, I can look to see what things I can work with here. And so I can look at threshold for one. Kind of interesting, but notice it changed it for everything. I don't really want that to happen, but I only want this threshold to happen on her picture. And so I'm going to press Alt on the keyboard with this kind of highlighted, and notice what happens. It has a little box, and it's only going to apply it to this layer. So now the threshold is only on her, which is pretty cool. But let's see what else I can do with this. I like the way that I can make this, I can choose a specific color in an object. So we're covering a lot of tools here. And so there is another tool here under your selection tools where it's a magic wand tool. And this is great at selecting different tones. So if I wanted to select just the tones of her, or this black tone here, then what I could do is highlight or just select that black. Now I've selected it, but it selected all the black of everything. So what I'm going to do is undo. I'm going to undo Control Z. And let me just try selecting this layer and then select this. Now notice that it selects all the black on just hers. Now I can refine this, how much black it selects with this tolerance here. I can make this really high. I can make it like 100 and see what happens. I'm going to try selecting again. Now it selects a lot more of that black area. So the reason I did that is because now with that selected, I can choose a paint bucket tool and I can recolor things. I can choose this swatch right here and choose a red and paint inside her. And so I can see it shows up here, but it's not showing up on my it's not showing up on my actual image. And that is because this threshold is kind of covering it up. And so that's something I can now use my selection tool, select the white areas. What if I delete those out? And if I hide the threshold now, I've got something totally different to work with here. I still have the selection made, and I can do Control D will deselect things. So now I have this kind of ghostly image of her, something kind of different, something kind of makes me wonder about what exactly is happening here. And so there's different things that we can do with this. To make this stand out even more, what I can do is apply some effects. And if I look down here with this layer selected, and I've hidden my threshold layer now because I've done with it what I need to do. What I can do down here is add some different effects. And so there's an adjustment layer here. I can create a new adjustment layer. There's an effects button here. And if I do that, I can do something like put in like a drop shadow. That's something that's pretty easy to do. When I do that, this window pops up and I can tell it how much drop shadow do I want, what angle do I want this to go, how much do I want this to drop, how much spread do I want, change the angle of it. It kind of gives it a little bit more dimension now. So it's something that's kind of cool to play around with. And so I want this to kind of stand out as kind of a hard outline. So those are some basics. There's other effects here that you can work with too. Maybe drop shadow is not what you want to do. You can play around with these other tools. It's going to open up another window. It'll open up a window, and it has different options that you can play around with. You're really not going to know what they do unless you actually play around with them. So I canceled that one. And for right now, what I'm going to do is go to File. I'm going to Save As. I'm going to call this, I'm going to leave this as a Photoshop file because I want to come back to edit that. And I'm going to save this as my Conceptual Portrait. And find a place in your student drive to save that. So find a good safe place for it. And I've got a good folder here for edits and so on. So I'm going to save it in here. Actually, I don't have a folder for edits, so I'll make a folder for edits. New folder. I'll just call it Conceptual Portrait. And I'm going to open that and save it there. So this is a good start. We'll come back to this and finish this later.